Hello, and welcome to Friday Sips Live. And we are sans Dan today. Dan is in California working on quite the cool project for a fellow named Bicycle Nomad. His website is iambicyclenomad.com, and he's about to do a great big cycling trip across the country. And as we've mentioned a few times lately, Dan and I have projects outside of whiskey. Believe it or not, we do more than just drink whiskey. And they mostly revolve around cycling. But today, I didn't feel like hauling everything downstairs to where I would normally do this when I'm here by myself. There's too much going on in the house. But this is my office where I usually hang out. And I thought I'd show you because one of the other projects we work on is a podcast for a friend of mine called Mental Health Lead. Not that one. And this is where we do interviews. So when we bring people in to be on that podcast, they end up sitting here. Those are the former whiskey chairs from downstairs. We upgraded and replaced those chairs with even nicer chairs to do whiskey on. So that's where they sit there. And, I would have thought at some point I would sit up here and sip whiskey, but I rarely do that. If I do, I'm in front of here working. So although Let Me See That videos, all the podcast, Dan Slow Guy on the Fast Ride podcast, the Mental Health Lead, the Practical Still podcast, all the Open the Bottle videos and such, I produce or at least edit right here. So that's a little something different today. And something different. My mom made sure I knew about this, and I think she sent me something before I even realized it was coming on. But Jack Daniel's has these two new expressions. They've been on a tear making new stuff lately, and they did the Coy Hill, the hazmat proofed Tennessee whiskey. They've been very active in private barrels, and I've commented on, we had one, I think, on the lives, but I certainly did a video on a local single barrel that was quite delicious. And now we've got triple mash and bonded. And I just got these, an hour and a half or so ago. And I was kind of in a rush to get here, so I really haven't done any kind of reading on them other than the quick stuff. So I thought what we do is we go ahead and taste them today and see if anybody else has had them that's watching, and see if they're good. And then I'll do the normal thing. I'll go back and do the open the bottle and a formal easy review. We don't do too in-depth stuff, but we'll go back and taste those. So that's what I thought we'd do today, if that makes sense. Hey Bender, good to see you. And Larry says he's got a contractor coming, so he may drop in later. So I think I've been after the Jack Daniel's Bottled and Bond, which I believe was always a travel retail only for as long as it's been out, and I've never had a sip of it. I love Bottled and Bond whiskeys. I like Tennessee whiskeys. That should be right up my alley. But since I haven't ever gotten to taste that, I think I will start with it. So let's rearrange things here. And then maybe we can read the bottle on the triple mash and figure out what that's about. Unless, Bender, if you have any details on that, maybe let me know. Let's see. So we'll do... I hate that when that happens that way. They make it so hard to get into those. So, natural cork, your typical square Jack Daniel's bottle, some embossed. Let's see, that's probably some embossed lettering on there, which is kind of cool. But they're the largest whiskey. This is the best-selling whiskey in the world, Jack Daniel's. You think they could it's probably okay if they spring for some embossed glass. It's got some nice detail around the neck, and it's got a little wooden stopper with a natural cork. Lovely. Sorry for the extra looking around. I'm not in my normal. It smells delicious. Does not smell. That smells super Jack Danielsy. Let's see. A little hot. Of course, it's 100 proof because it's bottled and bond. That's delicious. That is a much thicker, creamier mouthfeel than your typical old number 7. And frankly, I guess I've got one more of those single barrels I bought recently, and they're not the barrel proof single barrels. They're at 94 proof, I think. But this is a more viscous feel than that. It's just like cinnamon sticks. Yeah, that's good. The oak's late on it. It's the cinnamon is there, but under it's almonds or even a bit of caramel. Caramel. What do you say? Caramel or caramel? Caramel. But it's hot on the nose. It is not hot on the palate. Delicious. Super happy with that. I don't know. It's not super Jack Danielsy. It's got very little of that typical Tennessee whiskey. No, but I'll tell you, it still stands up that I think that the Lincoln County process, where the distillate comes out before it's barreled, it goes through at Jack Daniels. It goes through 10 feet of maple charcoal that pulls out a lot of the fatty acids and cogeners and esters and whatever. I think it takes either some time, which this hasn't had a ton of time. This is bottled and bond and at least 4 years old. But I can't imagine it's much more than that. Although drinking it, I would, if I just sipped it, I'd guess it was more than 4 or 5 years old. But the label says at least 4, so you could bet it ain't much more than that. I think it either takes some time for the wood to do its thing and for those flavors that are robbed through that Lincoln. And I do think we lose good stuff in that Lincoln County process. But eventually the barrel puts some of that back, or at least some other interesting things back. And or you need some proof. So an 80 proof Tennessee whiskey is just never going to be fun to drink unless you're just into, pouring whiskey over ice, and then maybe that's fine. But once you get back to the mid 90s, which I thought that single barrel at 94 did a pretty good job of that, but this at 100, wonderful. I wish I'd brought another glass up because I really poured a little too much in there. And that's how we deal with too much whiskey. Okay, that is delicious. And I bought 2 bottles of it. I'm pretty excited about that. And this was my favorite store. Hazel's had these, and I noticed it last night, so I ordered them on their website for pickup in store just in case. And it shouldn't be. These are supposed to be widely released. But just in case it became one of those things that was hard to get, I went ahead and bought them. And then I went to pick it up today. And sure enough, they had the triple mash in the special glass shelf. It's not often that a $35 or $38 bottle of whiskey ends up in the super special glass shelf, but it did. So I asked for one, and turned out it was the last one. So I got the last one at that store. And then I stopped at a different store on the way home to get some steaks, and they had like 6 of them on the shelf. But I didn't buy any more because this is a different thing. I didn't know how much of that. So again, I didn't do my research ahead of time because I really just got back to the house. Triple mash, blended straight whiskey, a blend of bonded American malt, rye, and Tennessee whiskeys. So this does not have, it has the word Tennessee whiskey on it only because it is mixed in with the 3 things that are there. So Jack Daniels has distilled an American malt, which is pretty cool. I don't think they do that very often or haven't. We know they do a rye, and then they've got their Tennessee whiskey in there. So it's 3 different mash bills, I'm guessing. A malt mash, a rye, and a typical Tennessee whiskey. It is also bottled in bond, which I don't think I noticed that right off the bat. So that's cool. Also bottled in bond, so it's 100 proof. Their tasting notes are pleasant notes of honey, malt, and soft oak, leading to a long-lasting, well-rounded finish. at least 4 years old. So I'm excited for this. I'm going to tell you this while I've been rambling on about this. The finish of the bonded, still going, delicious. It's mellowed into, I don't know, pecans and cinnamon still there. Something, maybe it's the caramel thing still going on, but something sweet and sticky. It's just delicious. Just delicious. Super happy with that. Yes, Bender, try those out. And there are, no kidding, if it's in your state, it's supposed to be a wide release. These are supposed to be ongoing releases as well. And look, and I appreciate the price. These are, I think they're $35 each. And the second store I stopped in, they're always a few bucks high. They were at $42.99, so $43, and I think I paid $38 for the ones I bought, or at least the one I bought. This one, and so $38, $42, whatever. I'm not going to argue. They're good stores that stock a lot of whiskey, and if it means something to them to have $3, then they can have the $3. So here we go. Lovely cork sound. Even the cork's even embossed. I doubt very seriously it'll focus on that. Let's see. Yeah, it just won't. But you can see it's got Jack Daniel's Distillery embossed in the edge. That's nice. It's a nice touch. And the DSP Tennessee one on there. When you go on the tour, they tell you that Jack, everybody was distilling back in the day of Jack's day. And then the government came up with this DSP number, the Distilled Spirits Producer number, and he wanted to be legit. And so Jack quickly got his act together. He wasn't really that far into the career yet, and went down and got registered. So that's how he became the number one on that DSP label. Those are sequential. So now, I think now in Kentucky, they're up to 20 or 30,000. But in Tennessee, and that is markedly different. Let's get some pouring action going here. There's that label if you want to make sure you find it. Oh, that was the wrong camera. That camera. There's that label. All the cameras are mixed up too. In Dan's garage, I have an order for the cameras, and here I didn't have quite the order. I didn't think it through well. The nose is pretty similar to the other one, and this is, to me, this is more Jack Daniel's nose than the bonded. There's definitely something funky in there that's more malty. So that 100 proof drink's just a wee bit hotter. Oh my goodness. The mouth feels not quite as viscous as the bonded, but there is just a wonderful, it's like peanut brittle. Oh my goodness, or toffee or something. It's on the nose too. It's not confectionery like powdered sugar, but it's like a praline. That's what it is. Like a pecans and praline. That's quite good for a $30, $40 bottle. And very different. The finish, you pick up that, there's more rye in there, so you pick up some spiciness on there. That's good. But it is, the mid palate's like a praline, like a pecan praline. If you've ever been to New Orleans and bought the good pralines, that's what that tastes like. There's a creaminess over the top. Oh, well, Bender, you know, You got a bottle of water. I'm making you thirsty. That's fun. I'm glad. I wish you had. I know some folks have to not be able to sip, but soon. But I think what we're learning, that both of these are really good. Both of these are significantly more enjoyable than Old Number 7, and they're different. And I think I gotta say I like these better than that single barrel, that store pick single barrel. I liked it a lot. I think there's a lot more going on here as far as the finish and the complexity while you're drinking it. And neither of them are terribly sweet, but they are sweet. It's a sweet experience for a whiskey. Excuse me. That was a different flavor. It's fruity when you when it comes back up. Oh, that's delicious. I'm so excited about these. I'm glad that I found them. I'm glad my mom sent me the note to make sure that I knew about them. I'd kind of heard about them, but I didn't really dig in until she sent that. So I'm super happy she did that. Thanks, Mom. Mom's always there for you, right? Oh, that's delicious. All right, so I think we're going to leave it at that. This was a good day. These are good bottles to buy, 100%. I'm going to live with it a little more. I'll do the official bottles, the open the bottle videos on these, and I'll do some reading to make sure I understand the details, and I'll relay those in those videos. Live with them for a while. We'll go back to the bottle down the road. This is very delicious. I don't have a lot else to talk about. There's not much going on in our whiskey world, other than that. I think. Oh, I'll tell you the ones we had last week. The Dragon's Milk and the Wyoming Whiskey Outrider have been back to both of those in the week. Stand by everything we said there. We put the open the bottle videos up, so if you want a little more detail on those, not a ton. Dan and I did those videos right after we stopped the live stream last week, but I've been back to those during the week. And I'll tell you two things. The Dragon's Milk holds up. The herbal nature of that. I said vegetal a lot, and it is it's not a sweet, but there is there's something natural about the way it tastes, which is interesting. It's very herbal on the end. It's got a lot of the things you'd expect to find in a rye whiskey in it. But I'm fascinated with it. I think they did a really good job with that whiskey at $45. The Dragon's Milk Origin, if you haven't tried that based on last week's stream, please do that. It's delicious. And we talk sometimes about how if we want, as whiskey drinkers, if we want experimentation, there's certainly things that the big distillers are going to try and do in experimenting. I mean, Jim Beam last week or so just opened the Fred Beano Distillery. They made Freddie the master distiller. He's doing some experimentation. They're going to be distilling what will become Booker's there. But the big distillers are a bit in a box. I mean, they're publicly traded companies. They've got to do things a certain way. Some of these smaller distilleries, they don't have those constraints, and they're going to try some stuff. And some of it's going to be just weird and bad. Some of it's going to be good. And that Dragon's Milk Origin is something where it came out really well. And I think that's probably because fermentation matters so much. And of the big distillers, they've had their yeast and their fermentation down for decades. In Jack Daniel's case, 100 years, Jim Beam's case, 100 years. That part's not going to change. And if you don't change that part, what you do after is limited. I think, and I'm no distiller, but I think you're limited to grain choice and perhaps some finishing, but you're not going to be able to dig super deep. But if you know fermentation, and you got to figure a company like New Holland Brewing, who's been brewing beer for years, where it's all about fermentation, they know. That's Watts, my dog, by the way. They know fermentation, and I think that's what we get out of that. We get something different. Maybe they didn't just follow the tried and true methods. Maybe they tried something different. I think that bottle's worth trying. If it's available in your area, 100% buy it. The Wyoming Whiskey Outrider, that bottle's almost $70 when Dan and I both during Friday Sips Live and after when we sat down and did the video, we were struggling. We wanted to say, yes, it's worth $68 or $70. And we kind of did, but we were struggling. But I'm telling you, after going back, and it's just a 200 milliliter bottle, so I don't have a lot to go back to. I think it's worth it. That is a different whiskey, and it's different partly because it's a mix of two things. It's a high rye bourbon and it's a nearly rye whiskey. What does nearly rye mean? Well, if it's going to be a rye whiskey, it's got to be 51% rye in the mash bill. So it could be that it's 50 or 60% rye, 40, 50% corn, a little bit of malted barley. So it doesn't qualify to be bourbon. It doesn't qualify to be rye whiskey, but it is American straight whiskey. You blend those together, that's what you get. It is delightful. And at 100 proof, $70, it feels like a lot. But again, if you want something different, sometimes you got to try something different. And maybe there's $10 or $15 in there that's just economies of scale or whatever. I think it's worth it. I'm not gonna wait too long and go back to the bottle of that one and put a separate video up, so be on the lookout for that. But if you're on the fence, you want something different, and if you are a high rye bourbon drinker or a Kentucky style rye aficionado like I am, where the Wild Turkey rye or the Knob Creek rye is up your alley, this is going to be a whiskey that appeals to you. It's that with that same, there's some spicy undertones to it, but there's also a sweetness to it that most of those nearly or barely rye Kentucky spirit don't quite have. So it's a neat thing. It's in between. I'm leaning towards, in fact, I actually tried to buy a bottle today, and there, maybe this is telling you something. There was a tag on the shelf for the whiskey. There was no whiskey there. So I was trying to buy a bottle today, and it wasn't there. Maybe that tells us something that's pretty good. I think it's pretty good. I think it's worth trying. I know that's maybe, if you look at what it is, a non-age stated product like that, maybe that feels like it's 10 or 15 bucks too high in today's market, but if you're going to stretch for that whiskey, it's really tasty. I think that'll do it for today. Cool, Bender. Yeah, keep your eyes open for that. I think it'll be, it's going to be wide release, these two Jack Daniels releases. I think they're delicious. I'm really excited. I've got them. And I got to tell you, today was a struggle to get ready, but I miss you guys. I like hanging out with you. I love drinking with everybody, and it's fun. And I have a lot of open bottles. So if I didn't do this, if I just opened the bottles for no reason, that's no good, because my wife and I were just discussing how I'm really going to have to figure out what to do with all the bottles. They're getting kind of piled up. So anyway, it was good to be here. I appreciate you guys showing up. Bender, thank you so much for hanging out with me again. Side note, let's see what Bender says. Oh, the regular Evan Williams single barrels, the vintage ones that you see with the black wax top. I am a fan of those. I'm absolutely a fan of those. If that's the case, I will go buy quite a few of those. I don't know why I don't buy more of them. I think the reason they don't get the hype, the love, is that the proof's a bit low on those. I've had probably a dozen of those. Never have I had one that wasn't delightful. Yeah, that's bad news. I will go out this weekend and scoop up some of those for sure, Bender. Thanks for letting me know that. Evan Williams whiskey, that's just good stuff. I mean, it's Heaven Hill whiskey. One of the ones, I don't know where we did it. I snuck one of those in on Dan on a blind tasting, the Evan Williams Black Label, the 86 proof regular old. I had a 200 milliliter plastic bottle I bought while both my wife and I were traveling. Snuck that in on him because it was really good, and he thought it was way older and way proofier than it is. It's delicious. Evan Williams whiskey, I really like, and those little vintage single barrel offerings are just delicious. They're typically, I think, 8 or 9 years old. The vintage piece, they take an approach of, rather than saying it's this old, they give you the in the bottle, or in the, how when it came out of the barrel, I guess, and in the bottle. So you have a vintage of, maybe it's when it went in the barrel. And that way you know how long it stayed in the barrel based on when you bought it, kind of thing. It's kind of fun. But I think they're delicious whiskeys. They are not proofy. They're not super rich on the palate. But they're very tasty. They're always good. I've never had one that wasn't really good. And they're, Bender, maybe, I don't know what they cost in your range. I think around here they're still about 28 or 30 bucks. So that's really hard to beat. So for sure, thanks for the heads up. I will absolutely go out and buy a few of those this weekend. Although I have to admit, when I went to pick up these 2 bottles of Jack Daniels, that's all I went to do at that store. Well, I was supposed to get some tequila and some dry curacao for my wife's margaritas. I spent a ton of money. So I got I didn't have any rye whiskey for Manhattans, and they were out of Wild Turkey 101, so I bought the Knob Creek rye, which is delicious. And then, of course, I had to buy some tequila. I had to buy the dry Curacao that we're out of. I bought the 2 bottles of Jack Daniels. Oh, then they had the triple mash, so I bought that. Holy smoke. And then I stopped at the store to get the steak. They did have Wild Turkey 101 rye, so I bought that. This was an expensive day. So there's Larry. Larry made it for the end. Larry, it's not because you're here. It's because I have nothing left to say. I'll recap for you. If you find these two new Jack Daniels releases, the bonded and the triple mash, do not hesitate. Buy those bottles. They are quite delicious. I enjoy both of them. I'm still enjoying some. Very different, these two whiskeys. They do not drink anywhere near the same. Quite tasty. So try that out. And I think that's it for now. So thanks you guys so much. Even Larry, who just showed up. Thank you so much, Larry, for hanging out with us. Check out the stuff Dan's doing. Dan and I are doing on Slow Guy on the Fast Ride. So you can slowguy.thefastride.com. If you are, I know Larry rides bikes, but if you're interested in cycling, that's going to be cool. We're about to launch in the next month or so the Dawn Patrol mountain bike site. And so it's a lot more bike content, but also check out the Mental Health Lead podcast. It's on any of your podcast platforms, mentalhealthlead.com also for the website. But that's some interesting thoughts on, we all struggle with things, and what are we doing to raise our hand, and what are we doing to help each other, and what can we do to just help, because it's a lot of crap going on in the world right now. So check that out if you're in the podcast, Mental Health Lead. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, all the normal places. And that happens. We record those interviews typically right here in the room. So good times. And I think that's it. Cheers, guys. Thanks again for hanging out. I really appreciate it.